Back in the Bay magazine is really proud to have Bob Moynan here today, and you're going to tell us some tales from yesteryear.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe just a quick introduction of your life here in North Bay so far.
Okay. Well, it goes back a long way. Came here with A&P when it was up there on Algonquin Avenue. I guess I was 19. And
What year was that?
oh boy,
Yeah.
31. I was born in 31, so 41, 51 would be about 50.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, a lot of ground covered.
You're on council?
Yes. Made friends. Probably what made it all possible was meeting Jack Shaw, who owned MacDonald Beverages.
Okay.
And we made a deal that I didn't have much money, but I'd earn it, and then he'd sell out to me, which he did, which really made everything else possible.
Okay.
Because it gave me the time to do other things. And probably the first thing was council and Dickerson. And funny story on Dickerson to start it off was that one day there was a bit of a gambling house at the restaurant there. The Chinese guy had a restaurant on Castle and the Bypass, and they were raided, and Dickerson got picked up, as did the Moorlands. Everybody else that was there, and Dave was a particularly good friend of mine, but Dave and Russ and Bill and the whole kit and caboodle. But the only guy who got taken to jail was Merle.
All right.
And so I didn't think that was very fair. And so I bailed him out.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, it was $100.
No kidding.
Yep.
$100.
To me, as I say, why did he get arrested and not the other guys? But anyway, it was a bit of a fun incident to have happened, and it happened in that way. And it wasn't long after, because it must have been prior to 67, because in 67 was our country's 100th anniversary or whatever. Right. And special deals were made available to municipalities.
Centennials.
For the centennial projects. And so I went to him with the idea of making the YMCA a centennial project. And if he could get, he was all for it, as long as it wasn't going to cost the taxpayers anything. And so I said, well, the only way that it's not going to cost the taxpayers anything is if you get a grant to build it, and then you sell it to the YMCA Board of Governors for $1, and we'll run it.
All right.
So that it'll never be an expense to the city and the citizens. And so that's what we did. And we literally did just that, and it's been working ever since. It means subscriptions or dues are paid by people who use it that can afford to. But other than that, there is no cost to the city, and that project worked very, very well. And it wasn't long after that the college situation came along. There were a lot of us grumbling in North Bay that Sudbury was getting everything, and that the university was just a fly on the wall, and so was the college, and so was the nursing school, and so was the teachers' college. And but how could we afford to have any of these facilities available here in North Bay? And so I went to see Bill Davis, who at the time was Minister of Education, and he said, Bob, we can't afford to do that in North Bay. He said, if there was any way that these guys would get off their thrones and work together and pull together and share facilities, then he said that would be different. I said, well, how would be if I can get the college and the university and this nursing school and teachers college all together to use the same library, the same cafeteria, the same buildings, the same whatever. He said, if you can do that, then he said, I'll get you the money. And that's makes a long story short, that's exactly what it was. We got everybody singing off the same song sheet. I was chairman of the subcommittee that represented all the partners, and we all agreed to what it was. I was founding chair of the board of Canadore College, but it was mainly that subcommittee that agreed to work out of one facility like we are now. the only thing that hasn't happened is one board of governors and one president. But it was really a small thing to not lose it because of that, because everything else in terms of the cost effectiveness and the efficiencies was gained by what we have now. And so we've got what we've got because we were willing to compromise and work together. And a lot of people that are long gone, Trussler and Herb Brown, and a lot of guys that worked really hard to make this happen. And it's given us, and this guy now, our current president, is doing a fabulous job at making it the kind of special place in the community that, that it is.
And that other board you're talking about was the Nipissing board.
Yes.
Yeah, and they ended up, was it the 90s they got their charter to be a separate university? Or
I'm not sure, because I concentrated on the college side of it rather than the university side of it. There are lots of good guys working the university side of it. So there was separation in the sense of focus and what you're we're trying to accomplish. But yeah, it just...
I think I first met you when, shortly after I started working for the president's office with Mayor Lee, right? 1987, it was the summer that I started there.
Good.
Yeah, and she was my first look at a real professional proofreader.
Right, and she is that.
Yeah, she's really good that way.
Yeah, she's good at that.
Yeah, but what were you doing for the college back then? I can't remember.
Well, as I say, primarily it was in the political side of it, if you want to call it that, but organizational side more in terms of getting the thing together. But what I had in terms of generated the Center of Entrepreneurship, Center of Innovation, Self-Employment Center, those kinds of organizations, and I was the director of it. So that was as a salaried person for the college was what I did. I kind of felt that I was putting my money where my mouth was in the sense of Center of Entrepreneurship and Innovation, because the story I like to tell about myself is back, and I do know the year because it would be 41, one of the major polio epidemics in Toronto, and I was about 9 or 10. Dad had just left for overseas in the Air Force as a chaplain, and I got polio, and thank goodness my mother had taken a couple of courses in nursing and recognized the symptoms, so I was caught very early. But Sick Kids was my home for 4, 5, 6 months that year, and my entrepreneurial skills came to bear when we'd get served lunch at noon, and a lot of the guys were a lot worse off than girls were a lot worse off than I was, and so they didn't eat their desserts. And I would buy them from them and then sell them in the evening.
A true entrepreneur.
True entrepreneur.
Yeah,
so
right
that's
on.
where it got started, because believe it or not, there was many pieces of pie and desserts that passed hands and got bought for 5 cents and sold for a dime, or bought for $1 and sold for $2. But that's where I started off buying and selling and realizing that maybe this is where I'm going to be someday. So I've been an entrepreneur ever since.
Oh, right on, right on. I'm going to double check, make sure this is going right, because once in a while it doesn't. First person I met in North Bay was a polio survivor. Was you, I guess. I didn't know it. But you ever hear of Joe Brown, drummer in town? Black guy, short. I met him.
Yeah.
I did a feature on him in 1988 for one of the little papers. I think it was the Express. But I saw him at the Belmont playing with bands, right? Not, and he's more severely afflicted from his polio, but he came out of Buffalo.
Right.
And he's a great musician. I think he's still living in town here. Yeah, but it was the first time I saw somebody afflicted like that from polio. And I've been meaning to go over and talk to him, because I imagine with the pandemic and the vaccines and whatnot, there's a story there, right?
Yes,
How
yes.
important that technology is.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
There's an interesting twist on that one, just because it's through Rotary, primarily, as well as a lot of other people. Polio is almost eradicated in the world. There's a couple of little spots in Africa, I think, left. But one of the reasons that got it beat was going to a spray, because some of the people were very nervous about a needle being stuck in them and stuff like that.
It's invasive.
Invasive, yeah. And so I just read the other day that China has perfected the polio vaccine in a spray. And so it's going to be much easier to get it shared and get people to be willing to get behind it. It's unbelievable that could be back. But with COVID and all of the other things that, we're seeing, maybe a different world we're going to be living in with transmissible diseases. And gosh, if we've got to live with, putting ourselves out to protect other people as importantly as in protecting ourselves.
Well, I think the polio vaccines through the 50s. When did the polio vaccines really get pushed forward?
Well, it would be, it was at the early part of 40s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Into the 50s too, I think.
Yeah, 40s and 50s.
Yeah. And it is a process. Vaccines were very, still new then, and different newness here. And, some people didn't fare well with the first vaccines, or depending on whatnot. And so there's always been a little bit of vaccine hesitancy, but the numbers of people that are spared, these debilitating diseases is makes it necessary.
Yep.
Yeah. So are you still with the Rotary?
No.
No.
No, I'm not. I'm still active in the sense that doing good things, but in the independence and the freedom to be able to.
Yeah, you don't need that structure.
No, I've found that harder and harder to live with as I got older, because I knew my limitations and I could work within my limitations.
It's tough to be 68, eh?
Yeah, it sure as hell is. It was. At least 30 years ago.
How old are you now, Bob?
91.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, you're doing well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're doing well.
Well, there's almost 1 million kids in Africa that have books that didn't have them. And we were 7 years working at it. Guys like Captain Ed Smith, have you ever heard that name? But he's in the military. I think he's retired now. But we worked with him, and he did all the logistics. But we ended up shipping 3-4 sea containers a year to Africa. And we were just approaching 1 million books that we collected. We were the most terrible throwaway province part of the world here, in that even when the schools get a new textbook, they've only got so much shelf space. And so when a new one comes in, the other one goes out and goes in the garbage.
That's a shame.
It is, and so much that some garbage locations in Ontario won't even accept them. They end up going to Detroit and where. Anyway, so that the source of books became hot in the United Church in Powassan. We started a bookstore for local people and regional people, and we just ended up having so many books that we just couldn't. We get people calling us with 10,000 books. What do we do with them? And we even ended up with somebody suggested we'll call the not the Attorney General, who's in Ontario, the highest political position.
Governor General?
The Governor General or Lieutenant
Governor.
Lieutenant Governor.
Yeah.
And he said, sure, we can get the OPP cars to pick them up. And there you can use their jail cells to store them in. And, that was the kind of way things sort of fell into line and things happened. And so we ended up over a period of 7 years shipping, as I say, almost 1 million. But the poorness, the poverty over there is just so terrible that we can't judge them, but it's difficult for them to deal with anything that's even close to of value without them thinking, what am I going to eat today? And so we used to slip them 10, 20, this sort of thing. This is at the border. This is with the paid officers of the court, or not the court, but of the customs and that sort of thing when the seed container arrived. So we were there to clear it through customs, and then with the help of the Cameroon military as well as the Canadian military, we would do the distribution. But anyway, the last seed container that I was over there for, they wanted $50,000 to clear it as a little side payment, which of course we had no access to that kind of money, and even if we did, we probably shouldn't have spent it in that way. So that was the end of the program.
That's too bad.
Yeah, just too bad.
Graft.
Yep, graft and corruption caused the loss of all that good. And his focus was medical equipment, and ours was books. So his was equally important. One of our hospitals would be converting over to electric beds, and he was in a network that he would be advised, and they'd go and pick up all the beds out of the hospital instead of them going into the garbage and be loaded up and taken to the next sea container going to Africa. And so, and when you see the threadbare shit that they laid on sick, compared to what we have, it was just unbelievable. But anyway, that's a story that sort of came and went, and one of the little guys came up after the presentation and held out his hand, put his hand, let 3 coins fall into my hand, 3 of their pennies, which would be worth way less than 1 of our pennies. And he said, among other things, he said, why did you come? Like, why are you here? And from this little guy, And I said, well, and I had to think about it because I hadn't had it prepared in advance. And I said, it's because we care. We all care, really. I said, you look out there, we care, but we don't know how to fix it. We don't know how to make it right. And so we're just doing the best we can. Came back and thought, what next? Was in saying goodbye to one of Mary Lee's aunts, and she was just crying her eyes out because she thought that her husband didn't love her anymore because he didn't sleep with her anymore, and he had long passed. And so she was just crying her eyes out, and then we talked the nurse into leaving us alone, and I talked to her and I just told her the truth. I said, he's in heaven. The reason your husband's not here is because he's in heaven with his brother and sister waiting for you. And she was fine from that point on. And it taught us a lesson that there's just so much loneliness in the nursing homes that we've got people who live within 50 miles of North Bay, and they haven't seen their kids or anybody that's related to them in years. And they're just so friggin' lonely that it's just hard to believe. And so we got an idea of putting a flower on every nightstand of every senior citizen in our nursing homes anonymously, that they wouldn't know where it came from.
Oh, wow.
And then they could think, it's Joe. There's only one guy that would know that today's my birthday or whatever. And of course, you're quite capable of developing all kinds of scenarios at that stage, or the stage that a lot of them are in. And so we're now, we've tried matching up sources of fresh flowers with nursing homes. Excuse me. And we have several. I mean, No Frills, Castle Home, East Home in Boston, Waterside, Nipissing Manor in Corbeil, and the Waterside is with Jackman's. And so we have them, and once a month once a week. In the case of No Frills, they're just super supportive. We're now over 700 blooms per month
Oh, cool.
that are going, one bloom on each night table
Mm.
is coming to them, fresh flower every
What a
month.
great idea.
Yeah, so that's the current project in terms of We Care. Congratulate you on, you bring so much joy to people with that.
With the
stories
magazine?
here.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's,
Yeah.
I get a lot of good feeling out of it. Yeah.
Back in the Bay.
So what was Hugo like?
Well, Hugo.
Murray Hugo.
Yeah,
That should
Murray.
be- Yeah, Mr. Murray.
Dr. Murray.
yeah, there
Dr.
you go.
Murray Hugo.
Yeah.
Well, he was probably the best president we ever had. And he was the first one we ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And he really was tough. But who leading anything isn't going to be tough. And he was tough. And he had standards. And,
I knew it had this air of professionalism that I hadn't seen before when I got there. It was just like, I haven't, never been at that level of administration and somebody with that type of professionalism around them, and everything was very, I was always imagining that was how my dad's, the corporations he worked for, and that he was into the finance part, so I could, like, it was almost like his board level corporation
Sure.
experience when I got there, and I had no idea what that was like.
right.
Of course, I was 21 and kind of bushy-tailed and bright-eyed, and
Yeah.
probably didn't really fit in with that group. But Mary Lee and everybody, Linda Lamotte, made me feel welcome and appreciated. 'Cause
Yeah.
I brought a bit of energy into them,
Yeah.
into that office for sure.
There was a lot of good
Ron St. Louis got me the job. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He brought me in, and that was great. I took a year off in between the first and second year of the print journalism, so that I could borrow less. Right.
Right.
But that was cool. That was
Good.
very good.
Good.
I had my first assignment, and I was supposed to take a picture of him dropping the puck. It wasn't my first assignment, but there was a hockey game here at West Ferris Arena, and he was dropping the puck. It was for the Canadore Panthers team, and I was just told to take a picture of the puck drop, but I wasn't really sure what I was getting into.
Right.
I didn't know Dr. Murray Hugo was going to be dropping the puck, and I didn't realize it was such a big ceremony. And I showed up just running into the arena because they were waiting for me. Everybody's lined up. Where's that photographer? And I took probably the crappiest photo I've ever taken with an old black and white. I was sweating bullets when I was in the darkroom souping it because I knew I didn't light it very well, and it was very thin. It was one of the worst puck drop photos I ever took. Right? But
Right.
it was. I remember that.
Yep.
Kind of took other assignments a little bit more seriously. Yeah.
Better things to come.
Well, it's learning ground. Young guy,
Yeah.
young buck thing, right?
Right.
Got to learn somehow. Usually it's by failing. Any other stories about Mayor Dickerson? Because he's like the big ticket item for stories.
Yeah, I guess so.
What was he like?
Well, actually, he was a blustery type of guy, in terms of he had his own agenda, and his line of right and wrong was pretty wide.
Yeah, he colored outside the lines, eh?
Yeah, right. There's a story I was never directly involved in, but in terms of building houses and hooking up the wires to the hydro directly to his houses, so that he wouldn't have to pay for any hydro, and stories you hear like that. But as I say, you call a guy for as it is, and when I told him the story about how much the city needed the Y, and just to give him a way out, he was just fair and honorable, and stuck by his word. And
Well, he knew a good idea when he heard one.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he was good. Yeah, good good for the city. Certainly, we're going to be in for a change now, and it'll be interesting to see how things go. Yep.
So how many years did you own it?
Be close to 30 years. And there's some really great guys that I shared it with. Were Carmen Lucenti, you probably heard, and Phil Dufresne, and Chuck Kelly, and Ross Riley, and guys that were the department heads and that sort of thing. So as long as I had control, I didn't have to have 100%. I just needed to have 55 or 60. And so that's the way I worked it, and we did very well. Towards the end, I was spending more time working for the college, gratis, and so that's why I said it was my job, my shares at MacDonald's that made it possible. But,
So there's a couple of years ago they were trying to bring back the Temagami Dry.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
That would have been kind of neat if they could have done that.
Yes. The only coke bottler left is up in Kapuskasing, and he picked it up and still sells it in the far north. You can buy it down as low as Temagami, I think. I've seen it in a couple of stores here at one time or another. So it's still around. But it would have been fun. But it's, the competition is tough. And McDonald's and...
You mean competing with Pepsi and Coke is tough business?
Yeah. Well, and even with them, as Coke used to say, hard as it is to get to be number one, it's harder to stay number one.
Mm-hmm.
And they just got so much power that, even they're back to now, we should be in a returnable bottle, like the beer company made it work.
Mm-hmm.
And we were trying to make it work, and they wouldn't support us. So they would put it in a can or a non-returnable bottle and sell it to the head office and they would ship it out in their trucks to the stores. So it came into our territories illegally, but that's how it got spread, in terms of the cans and the non-returnable bottles. We managed to get rid of the non-returnable bottle, but the can, of course, we couldn't compete with, and now they've got a deposit on it, so it's returnable anyway, so it's crazy, and it was, Atlanta, Georgia, and New York that were making the decisions for Canada, and that's not a good place to be.
And you guys were recycling.
Yep. Yeah, and then we needed the storekeepers to make that work, and so it's been an interesting lifetime.
It's funny how things go around in circles.
Yeah, that's right back. Yeah, wow. For sure.
Any advice for people that are wondering what they should do with their time?
Oh boy.
You guys are always busy.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
just find a cause?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Be open.
Mm-hmm.
Just be open to it's there's lots of people need help. Goodness knows we see it with our homelessness problems in North Bay. And so yeah, there's lots to do. Just
my advice to people is that, and the way I'm trying to live, is that when the good ideas come, jump on them, right? Act right away. Don't think about anything very long. Don't plan it, just do it. Right? And if it feels good and it works out, fix it and do it right or better. But you get an idea, go for it, right?
No, there was a doctor friend that when that question came up, I'll mention one other, was one at a time. You want to change the world? Just do it one person at a time. Just one person in your life. I was coming out of church at the Pro Cathedral one day with Bob Wood, and we were having a chat much along the same line as this, and he said, Bob, this is Bob Wood speaking, he said, everybody's got something. And he said, if you can get that in your head, that everybody's got something, then when you meet them on the street, don't ask them how they are, just say something else. Make the subject something that builds them up, and what a wonderful, beautiful day it is, and haven't seen you for a long time, and just take it from there, you know, and
That's a good idea, because when you ask them how they are, that's just a big open can of worms.
Yeah,
and they know you
exactly.
don't really want to know.
right.
But I like to ask people, what are you doing today?
Yeah.
What are you doing today? Right?
Yeah.
And usually that leads into something that they're positive about, because that's what they're going to do usually, unless they're going down to the courthouse to
Yeah.
pay a bill. But
Right.
yeah. Hey, Arlie, how you doing, man?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Not interrupting?
Did you
No.
know Bob Moynan?
I do.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right on.
For years and years.
And years and years and years and years.
Prominent man in the community.
Yeah. Yeah, well, no, we're just wrapping up our interview. I really
Yeah.
appreciate the time. Thank you. And if you ever think of anything else you want to do or say, or a story you want to share, all these things add up into a nice little story. Right?
Okay.